It seems like farmers in the US are under attack, and the motivation, honestly, is kind of spooky. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Sperrazzo. Agriculture and farming has been the backbone to society forever. I mean, food production is literally how we survive. But as society has become technologically more advanced, it seems like the people at the top are forgetting that the farmers are the hand that feed us. Now, I've been following this channel, Yanasa TV, and he's been covering all the different farm controversy news all across the US. And honestly, he has a lot more content that I'm excited about. Not because I don't like his videos, that just means that there's a lot of policies being passed that are not helping farmers. And it gets other people thinking, is there a reason that they may be trying to control the food supply? We'll get into that in a second. But the big one that's happening right now is in Idaho. There's a curtailment of water to 500,000 acres. Now it says here that the board issued the curtailment order on May 30th due to a projected shortfall of 74,100 acre feet of water to the Twin Falls Canal Company, which has senior water rights. An acre foot of water is the amount of water it takes to cover an acre 1 foot deep. Now, on the west side of America, water is distributed by seniority, essentially. The people that have been farming or using that water source for the longest get access to that water before the people that have been using it more recently. So the Twin Falls Canal Company has been using it very long. They need 74,100 acre feet of water. They're short, so they're cutting off the water to over 500,000 acres of farmland. Why this is so detrimental is that these farmers have already invested thousands of dollars per acre, and now they're not able to feed these plants, which is going to cause death of crops, different farmers to go out of business. It's going to affect the transportation. It's going to affect the grocery stores. It's going to affect all the companies that rely on the potato production in Idaho, among all the other crops as well. Now, is it really just about saving a little bit of water in the aquifer, or is it something a bit more sinister? Well, you know me, I'm a sucker for a good conspiracy, and people have been pointing out that a lot of these farms are actually over cobalt mines in the US. Now, cobalt is the resource that is used to create batteries, I believe, for electric vehicles. It's also used for military weapons and many other products. So cobalt mines have already been in lots of trouble for creating Tesla, which is supposed to be a environmentally friendly vehicle, or all electric vehicles for that matter. But in reality, they are some of the most environmentally dangerous mines to ever exist. On top of that, there's the closest thing to slave labor being used in Africa to mine these cobalt mines. So from a humanitarian perspective and an environmental perspective, it's actually 10 times better to just drive a gas vehicle. So going back to Yanasa TV, who I mentioned in the beginning, he explains kind of this thought process or concern or conspiracy better than I could have.
The bigger question I think that comes into this is, the water usage that it takes to mine cobalt. And that's what this entire water curtailment was about. And if you wanted to come up with a long-term solution, putting the farmers out of business would be that long-term solution. The farmers, though, in this case, they're not just up against the cobalt mines. And I think the cobalt mines are...
So he implies the fact that if you can put the farmers out of business, then that land goes up for auction, in which case the government could step in and buy that land and then eventually use it for cobalt mines. So is this one of the reasons that Idaho waited to give the curtailment to the water until after these farmers invested thousands of dollars per acre to farm their land?
Rather interesting, because when we get into this, you'll see that money that we passed to go to aid in Ukraine is actually going to this Australian cobalt mine in Idaho. And the reason for that is the U.S. Department of Defense is preparing for World War III. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. We need that cobalt for our weapons, for our national security. It's not going into electric vehicles like a lot of people say, or these other things. It is actually going into our defense. We can't rely on China if we end up in war with China to supply us with cobalt for our weapons.
So he's proposing that it's not necessarily even just shutting down the farmers to ruin them and we hate farmers and we hate America. It could actually be the idea that maybe the government understands we're a little bit closer to another major world war. Therefore, we need to be able to control our own supply of cobalt to supply our own government or our own military defense.
Big issue there as far as, it's one of the only cobalt mines in the United States. It is one of the largest cobalt strips in the United States. There's also cobalt in Montana, not far above, the Idaho cobalt area. But it does bring into question, do we have to have this cobalt for our national defense? And if so, what does happen to farmers out there? Personally, I'm not in favor of World War III, so I'd rather we not mine the cobalt and we keep the farmers. But I'm just throwing this information out there so you can see what exactly these farmers are up against. They're not up against saving generations of farmland, providing food for the masses. I mean, heck, if you make food more scarce, it's easier to control the masses, right? And if we end up in a situation where we are in World War III and we're heading toward in that direction faster than we ever have, then you want that control over the public, and you want that resource for our weapons.
I mean, he's not wrong. There is a lot of conflict going on overseas. I always have a hard time believing that we will ramp up to that point. I feel like we are in a dark yet sophisticated enough humanity for all of the elites and the countries to kill each other on their own time. But that's not the only darkness that's happening with the farming industry. The World Bank is trying to redirect farming subsidies from meat to fruits and vegetables for the climate's sake. Now, this is based off of the false notion that cows produce a lot of nitrogen emissions, which in the way that we factory farm cows nowadays, it could possibly be true, but how cows have been regeneratively farmed on farms like Will Harris, and also just in entire human history before the Industrial Revolution, cows actually reduce the nitrogen emitted into the atmosphere with the proper techniques. It says redirecting subsidies from foodstuffs produced from high emissions rearing, such as beef cattle, towards those with fewer emissions can help the developed world, including Europe, to achieve a net zero emissions, the World Bank said in its first strategic framework on food production impact on climate change. High-income countries should decrease consumer demand for emissions-intensive animal-sourced foods by fully pricing environmental and health externalities, repurposing subsidies, and promoting sustainable food options, the report released on Tuesday, May 7th reads. Now, whether it's just ignorance or some crazy conspiracy, it's kind of odd that red meat, one of the most bioavailable foods, most nutrient-dense foods for humans ever created by God Almighty, is the thing being targeted here so that we can all become little soy boys eating apples and other fruits and vegetables and soybeans. Now, I love fruits. I love vegetables. But as a side, I need a good hearty steak to be moving around and feeling good. Now, what's even more concerning with this net zero emissions talk that the World Bank talks about is their plan. Now, their plan is, number one, increase productivity, 2, enhance resilience, and 3, reduce emissions, which all of those include this plan that is not possible for small scale farms, because it's not that they're amazing experts like Will Harris or Joel Salatin on farming and regenerative farming. It's that they propose their own high-tech ways of farming so that we can have a net zero emissions, which really means if we can't control how you choose to farm, we're going to shut you down and have these farmers at a bigger scale that we can control every single aspect. Now, as happy-go-lucky as this sounds, the logical conclusion is taking away the right to farm. And just for something that's a little bit lighter, but also still equally scary, there's certain countries that are putting VR headsets on cows so that they believe they're in a green pasture, so that they eat more, so that they are fatter, so that we can get more meat out of them. Check this out.
But the reason for this might surprise you. In Russia, farmers put VR headsets on their cows during winter because when it snows, cows can't graze on green fields, which stresses them out and decreases their milk yields. The VR headsets show them a bright green field, relaxing the cows and increasing milk production by 22%.
I mean, isn't this just the most amazing crossover of the darkness of modern technology mixed with the control of animals and the lack of respect we have for them, mixed with the desire to increase production and factory farm them in a way that doesn't actually help the earth but takes away from it. Now, while the everyday person maybe just goes to a grocery store and says, who cares if they're factory farming or whatever, people that generally have negative trust with the average population see the value in these farms. Now, check this out. This is Bill Gates' land holdings by state. And he has 16,000 acres in Washington, 9,000 in Idaho, 975 in Wyoming, 20,000 in Nebraska, 69,000 in Louisiana, and all across the country, he holds massive amounts of farmland in acres. So why would someone that is one of the wealthiest people in the entire world be scrambling to acquire farmland. It makes me curious about his involvement with the World Economic Forum and possibly the World Bank. And all of this is why, if you can afford it, it is important to, maybe even if you can't afford it, frequently, semi-frequently, go and support your local farmers. Go and support the regeneratively raised beef in your local area. Go to the farmers markets, go buy the produce there and support local farmers' rights to farm. Because when we continually go out and it's a race to the bottom for the least amount of money per pound on poultry or beef or whatever it may be, it just creates this. It creates this factory farming that is taking away smaller farmers' rights to farm. It's taking away the attention to our food production that is extremely important. And you know what they say, that the new 401k is going to be knowing somebody that knows how to build things and knows how to grow food. Comment down below. I want to know what you guys think. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.